And we're back from our break. Today we're talking about International Women's Day week. Or, well, International Women's Day was on Tuesday, but we've turned it into a week because it's Thursday.
The Y Factor version.
Yeah. Now, International Women's Day is one of my favourite days of the year because we get to celebrate how awesome it is to be a woman. Right, Tasnim?
Look, I totally agree with you, Miran, but I think International Women's Day is about, it's not a time just to celebrate being a woman and the magnificent privileges that come with being a woman. I think it's also a time to bring some very, very important issues which face the Muslim women community in the West to the fore. Now, the Muslim community is often, especially the women, are seen as quote-unquote oppressed. They're seen as in need of liberation. They're seen as basically like stereotypes, and it's really interesting, you know, the stereotypes ranging from submissive and oppressed to exotic and, you know, behind the veils of a harem or something like that. So I think it's a balancing act for us to go out there and be like, look, get over it. You know, we're not these subdued burqa-clad women, and we're not, you know, dancing belly dancers behind the harem wall. We are, you know, women who have lives, who have personalities,
who have rights and responsibilities and manage to balance them and exercise them along with their religion. I think you were saying earlier that a lot of people tend to think that Islam and women's rights are actually contradictory and mutually exclusive, but it's not true. I think that if you have a look at many successful examples of women in our community, you'll see that it's okay to be both, and it works.
Not just okay, but Islam pushes us to be both. I think the beautiful thing about Islam is it's not so much about gender equality per se, it's more about gender equity. So I think Islam appreciates that both genders are distinct, not the same.
Yeah.
And I think in modern day popular discourse, because God is erased from the scene, that leaves a woman no other standard to be judged against except men. Whereas with Islam, we still have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a woman is honored and given value and is judged against the standard and value in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in relation to men.
So basically on the basis of how much you strive to do well and to gain hasanat in Islam, that's the standard we're measuring up against, not measuring what can I beat this guy in, or how much
I think the problem comes in because 50 years ago women thought, you know, because they were at home and that was the sphere, they thought, you know, if we go out, if we go to the factories, if we work, if we do what men are doing, we will have the power of men. However, what we're increasingly seeing is the problem is with this day and age, not only did we go out into the workforce, now we're expected to be a superhuman. We're expected to be the mother, we're expected to be a perfect wife, we're expected to be a homemaker, and at the same time we're expected to have a perfect career. On the flip side of the coin, the men's responsibilities haven't increased. So I think what it is, it's women are starting to realize our value isn't in relation to performing the roles of men.
Our value, we can do it. It's more like, should we be striving to equal men? It's like what you were saying before, it's about equity, not equality.
And that, honestly, that does not mean, you know, we're discouraging our audience out there from getting out there, breaking the barriers to be the best they can be in any field. What we are saying is, don't think in terms of, I'm going to be better than a man, because honestly, there's a quote by a feminist author that once said, women who aim to be like men lack ambition.
No, I completely agree.
What we're saying
we are already way more
totally awesome. No, honestly, you know, what we're saying to the Muslim women out there, it's really, really hard because you have a burden placed upon you to be the perfect person Islamically, socially, and have a career at the same time. So judge, your standard should be, how can I be the best person in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to the duties that God has allocated me, and not according to how can I be, you know, measured up against the best guy in this world or something like that.
And I think it's interesting because we're talking about personal standards here maybe, but the issue is that in society, no matter how far the feminist movement has come or how far that women have gone to strive for their rights and their, you know, positions, you still have a glass ceiling. You still have women not being able to get into the boys' clubs of, you know,
corporate law,
worlds.
etc.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really sad that in today's day and age we still are faced by these problems. But I think it's also good to look at what achievements that women have achieved. But at the same time, it kind of really bothers me when someone says, oh, this person is the first lady who went to the North Pole, or this lady is the first one to make it on,
as if it's such an exception.
It shouldn't be that amazing. You shouldn't hear that statement and say, wow. It should be, by this point in time, something that's normal to us. The fact that it isn't normal, the fact that we're still saying, wow, she's amazing, means
I think that
there's
comes
still inequality there.
It's a wider issue, the debate in terms of affirmative action. For example, Quentin Bryce came out and said
that's the Governor General, guys.
There should be a quota, for example, of women in certain public offices and stuff like that. And I think, when it comes to issues like that, setting a quota, with the selection criteria, it kind of becomes like, we need a woman in there, who cares, even if she's not right for the job.
I think that's the same thing that was happening when Julia Gillard was up for elections, and a lot of people were saying, oh, if we vote for her, she's going to be the first Prime Minister who is female. So are we voting for her because she will be the first female Prime Minister, or are we voting for her because she's the best person for the job? And I think that's really how you have to think about it in any context. Choose the best person for the job. If that best person is a female as well, then that's awesome. Go for it. But if you have two standards that you're weighing up against each other, who has the better qualities, who's going to do the better job, then I think
it reflects the still very, very entrenched gendered debate within our society. So obviously, for our Muslim sisters out there, we appreciate that we have rights in these Western countries that we won't be afforded otherwise. But at the same time, our Islamic values push us to be the best person we can be as women, and not as pseudo-men.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, since you just mentioned the difference between societies, another issue that arises is that stereotype that you referred to earlier about, you're either from a harem, silk clad, or you're, just oppressed and in a burqa and submissive and silent. Okay, now with certain societies that are referred to, for example, people always tell you, oh, what about Saudi Arabia? Women have no rights in Saudi Arabia. Well, to those people, you really got to clarify. It isn't about Islam. Just because a country says that, they follow Islamic law, whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that everything they do.
And they have deeply entrenched patriarchal, cultures in those countries. Well, honestly, the stereotype was, Middle Eastern women are submissive. And what the revolutions in Egypt, in Tunis have showed us, women out there, making YouTube clips, having Facebook pages, rallying the masses, women chanting, women screaming.
Most of the correspondents for Al Jazeera, I think, were female as well. There is no...
And I think that's what shocked the West. I mean, there's an article by Naomi Wolf recently which discusses this in detail. Honestly, the West is kind of astounded that, no, they're not behind the harems belly dancing, or no, they're not behind the burqa, covering their wounds. They're actually in the front lines. And I think Kevin Rudd released an article recently discussing this.
In The Australian, actually, had an opinion piece, and it was very... I liked what he wrote. He was saying... He was actually referring to Muslim women, saying, these women, like all of us, bring a plethora of identities to their contributions to the life of our nation. They're variously women, Arabs, Muslims, Australians. Great nations do not just tolerate such citizens, they actively celebrate and seek to harness their immense contributions and potentials. Now, thank you, K. Rudd, but that's pretty much a shout out to any woman who is out there and actually contributing regardless of what your identity is. And I think when people try to pigeonhole you into oh, she's Arab, she's Muslim, she's whatever, they stop and forget to think at the end of the day, you're a woman. Okay, so whatever it is that you're doing, don't acknowledge me just on what you see me wearing, or,
Not just that, but I think the Muslim sisters out there need to stop feeling that the label of Muslim women is a stigmatic or oppressive label, because honestly, a Muslim woman, I love to be associated with Aisha radiallahu anha. She narrated the most hadith, she had books, she was a scholar. People
travelled from all over the world to study with
her. We have the likes of Aisha being repeated throughout history. Not just that, even if you look at the hadith, the important emphasis the Prophet ﷺ places on a woman's role, whether it be as a mother, a sister, or just these womanly duties. I mean, the hadith that heaven is under the mother's feet. many references. So for our sisters out there, you're fighting a battle on two fronts. The first front is as a woman in society, and that has, alhamdulillah, we've fought long enough, we have some rights, but we're still going. And we're also fighting the battle on an Islamic front to show society that, look, we're not oppressed, we're not subdued, we're not waiting for you to come liberate us. We are women, we have a voice, and honestly, stop speaking on our behalf.
And I think if these people really actually went into many of the Muslim households, they'd realise that the power lays with the women of the house, not the other way around.
But honestly, at the end of the day, we need the Muslim sisters out there appreciate the role Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designated for you, and that's what brings you empowerment. And I think when we have that, it's honestly not a battle of the sexes. It's about men and women working together harmoniously, and that's our role. We're not out there to men are from Marwa and women are from Safa. I think that's what it was, or something. It's not about being at battle with one another. I think it's about harmonious cooperation, inshallah, to achieve and be the best Muslims we can be, have constructive families at the end of the day.
On that note, so it's not just Tasnim and I talking and giving our own opinions like they're expert opinions. We actually did bring someone who has heaps of experience in working with women.
The Y Factor.